Hello, I am Mark Mitchell, your instructor for online sociology, and I wanted to spend a few minutes with you today with this lecture there on Chapter 2 and just point out some things to draw your attention to and study for our quiz and our exam. These are the main points there that you really need to make sure that when you're reading that you understand because they are the main points, and some of these they just keep popping up chapter after chapter. So as you can see here, this is a slide that lists many of those points, and because we are talking about research and the experimental method there, that's where most of these are actually focusing on. So the scientific method there, that is one of the first things, or the very first thing there that we see on that slide. When you study sociology or psychology, the experimental method, the scientific method there is a very important part of it. And there's a specific step-by-step way. Everyone has, heard of the scientific method probably from grade school on, but it's the same thing here. Some of the steps are shorter or longer, anywhere 5 to 7. That's most of the textbooks that I've ever seen how they do it, but the process is pretty much the same. All right, so it is this organized way to be objective in our research that gives us confidence there when we research a problem that we actually are finding the truth. It is objective rather than subjective. Facts versus opinion, facts versus perception there, that's really what we want to do. And it occurs not only with what we see in our textbook and in many other disciplines there, the hard sciences, the physics, the chemistry, and then as well as medicine. When you read about a research study on the effectiveness of a certain drug, they are using this scientific method, or hopefully they have, and they can have confidence in those results. All right, so here we see that here are the steps, and this is what I mentioned to you earlier about being common form, and the number of steps sometimes varies, but notice the arrows, and this is really a theoretical process that never ends. Now, in practicality, it does end because people have limited amounts of time and money, and they will, research a question till they feel comfortable with the outcome or the probability levels, the significance levels of the study, and then, oftentimes it does stop. However, data is collected, for many, many years. I mentioned medical studies earlier, but that's a very good example where they have decades of research there, so it does go on quite a while. All right, so here, we just have the steps. These are more specific, listing them instead of the full graph that we had just a second ago here on the PowerPoint presentation. It also, hypothesis. That's a word that we hear a lot, but that is quite different from a theory in one basic regard. A theory is an idea about how something works in the world, but you don't conduct a scientific research or study or this process and scientific method on it. A hypothesis is where you do all these things. It is an experiment where you're going to have your variables, your independent and your dependent variables, and conditions and levels associated with each of those, and on and on and on. All right. We can think of major theories that are thought to be quite significant there, but the point is they have not been tested out with this scientific method. All right, another important point here for the scientific method when we formulate our hypothesis and actually run an experiment is it gives us the strongest possible relationship we can have between variables, and that is the causal that you see here on the PowerPoint. Causal is an A causes B relationship that we know why these two variables and how they are related. Now, correlation is exactly the opposite. They are related, but we don't know why. It is not a statement that A leads to B. Oftentimes, for example, there may be a third or fourth variable, or maybe we can't even find it there, but correlation just says, hey, we think they're related, but we don't know exactly why. With an experiment, that causal factor says, yes, we do know they are related. So smoking causes cancer is a very good example there of a causal connection between two variables, smoking and condition of cancer. All right, so some more parts there to the scientific method would be, for example, actually collecting your data. And that would involve your subjects, your participants. A sample is just a subset of the total group, and that is usually what we work with primarily in any type of experiment. It is very, very difficult to get every single person, object, or whatever you're studying there in your sample. The key is to make it generalizable, that it should be a random sample, but it should be representative of the group you're trying to study. So you need to know something about the population and the demographics of where you're actually trying to draw this information. People generally are very good at that today, and especially in terms of the past, but what they found was really important is to make it representative. It doesn't matter how many people you ask, so simply it's not a matter of quantity. If I ask, so many people, I'll get the right result. That doesn't lead to a correct result. Random is just the idea that everybody has an equal chance to be selected there. All right, of course, we do have other things such as snowball samples there that may lead to biased results that are not generally representative. So that's the caveat to be aware of if you're ever in a position where you're doing research or collecting research, things you need to be fully aware of. Validity and reliability relate to our experimental collection of data, in that validity is just ensuring that you're measuring what you intend to measure. So if you are indeed measuring or had a test that was measuring your knowledge of Chapter 2 material, you don't want it to be on Chapters 4 and 5. You want it to be on what you are intending there to measure. Do intelligence tests measure intelligence? Well, they should. And if they do, they have a high degree of validity. Reliability is the idea that you get consistent results, and hopefully they are consistently correct. If they were consistently incorrect, then that would lead you to the idea that you need to change something. So typically there, when we collect our data, we want it to be both valid and reliable. And again, I've used the example of an intelligence test. That is something that has both of these measures in it. Okay, now of course when you get to the end of this process, you want to develop a conclusion there that maybe does support your original hypothesis, and you generally set up a null hypothesis, your original thought there. The alternative is in case you're wrong there, but you're covering all bases so that one or the other is supported, one or the other is rejected, or there's doubts about it. And so that's the theoretical process by which you can continually, keep researching if you wish to do that. All right, let's move on there. Now, some of the major ways to collect data are listed here. This is another prime example of something that's really important here in the chapter. Surveys, ethnography, experiments, and existing sources or a literary search. And again, with time, these things have been improved. Some are more time consuming than others. There's an issue of reliability and reliability with these again. For example, how do you control for lying on a survey? If you're administering a paper and pencil survey like we see or online, you would have to have some sort of control there, such as repeat questions. And if you get consistently different answers on them, then that may indicate you're not getting true answers, somebody's not reading, or something that kind of sends off the alarm that this data may not be reliable at all. All right, experiments we've talked about. That's the scientific method. Let's try it out and see what happens. And you want to be neutral there, so we want to get the truth and not kind of cook anything and make it come out the way we really desire it to, but actually how it is in nature. Existing sources is simply going out there and finding out what other people have done in the past, and this may save you some time. It also may give you some good ideas that you haven't thought about. much easier today than in the past due to the collection of information on the internet as compared to the old library card catalog. That's exactly what I was used to when I was writing my thesis there. That's what I had to do, and that was much more time consuming there and harder to track down some of those sources that I actually needed. All right, more about these data collection techniques. The interview, the questionnaire / survey there. Sigmund Freud is one who did something of an interview. It was a case study, which is more of a clinical measure there, an in-depth information gathering process with many of his patients who had clinical disorders. If you've ever gone out on a job interview, that may be the first way that you think of this interview that's mentioned right here, and that's probably more representative. Case studies last in a long period of time, whereas interviews do not. They're usually one and done, or maybe two, depending on how many candidates are out there. But the point of it is both of them collect data. All right, questionnaire really the same as surveys. So if you're interested in participating in a survey or / questionnaire, go online, and there's lots of surveys there. They measure everything that you can think about. Consumer behavior, if it's tied to economics, somebody's going to ask a question about it in order to influence and measure your behavior so that the consumer spends more. We actually have a video in the online course here that we'll eventually get to, but it is called Consuming Kids, and they have actually done research there to influence how parents will spend money relative to their child's wants and desires. And then it actually goes further from there in that how do we influence children to ask their parents to get these things. It's hard for a parent to refuse a child often things that they want in toys, and they know this information well because they have collected the results there through surveys and other research methods. So all these things we're talking about, they do impact your daily world, and that's part of the point I'm hoping to get across here, is the real world application of many of these things. Okay, we also there have the idea of quantitative and qualitative research. One, for example, there, quantitative based on numbers, qualitative, think quality there, and not necessarily the focus there on the numbers that you find in quantitative, excuse me. All right, a good example there on all these things there from our book there, Surveying Cell Phone Users. Another way to collect data here is ethnography, and you can see here the exactly what it entails, the observation there, so that requires one to simply watch another either in a naturalistic setting or either in artificial setting, depending on what's going on. Maybe with people there, more of a natural setting, maybe with animals there. If it were an animal study, somehow generalizing to people, that would be an artificial or laboratory type observation. All right, both are useful depending on, again, your ideas and your objectives of what you hope to accomplish. Here under experiments, just mention some variables that you need to keep in mind. The experimental group is the group that actually receives the treatment. Again, if it was a medication study, they would get the real thing, the real substance there to see how it actually affects their behavior. Control group is the group that gets nothing, the placebo. In an experiment, you must have, at bare minimum, both of these, or else you need to call into question what you're doing. As bare minimum, both of these are needed. The Hawthorne effect shows unintended consequences there. When people are in an experiment or a setting where they think they're being observed, their behavior actually changes. So even in my recording today, I'm hoping that I'm coming across in a pleasant way. My language is fluid and audible and all that, but this is simply from the awareness that I know that others will be watching this, and so this is a very good example there of the Hawthorne effect. And of course, in our society today, we're being watched everywhere we go by cameras, whether you realize it or not. The gas station, the ATM, Walmart, Target, anywhere that you shop, guess what? You can smile, you're on TV. All right, now the existing sources, secondary analysis, literary research, a meta-analysis, you may see that referred to, but it is a large survey here of what's been done in the past. That meta just means large, great, but you're finding, just as many studies as you can. If you're conducting research or doing your thesis or dissertation, these will be words that you're going to be very familiar with for quite a while. Okay, we just have some more examples, and I'm going through those rather quickly. They are in our textbook, but they help to illustrate some of the main points that we have been looking at today. Table 2-3 here in our PowerPoint slides is just a summary there of the major research designs that our book has described, and so you can see them there. And of course, pay attention to the advantages and the limitations. Now, as a researcher, you will have to decide which of these is within your purpose, within your goals, within your budget, within your time frame. There are lots of considerations to make. For example, I used really the survey there and the existing sources and secondary analysis when I completed my thesis years ago there in the Industrial Organizational Psychology program at East Carolina. Of course, when we talk about sociology or psychology and you're actually engaged in experimentation, and especially there with people, you have to have a code of ethics. And think of morality too, but that means above what's legal. That's your bare minimum starting point, and then you want to consider the rights and considerations of your subjects there, and to maintain integrity there, their right to privacy, dignity there, to keep them from personal harm. If it's sensitive information, you want to keep it confidential. Informed consent, say if you're working with children or adults who cannot give it, then it would have to be received from someone else to weigh the harm-benefit ratio. So it's much stricter today than it was in the past. Many of the hallmark experiments in sociology and psychology would not be allowed today simply because of ethical research concerns. And then, for example, a study there would also disclose sources of financial support, and that's important too because of the possibility of bias and influence and losing that, the availability of neutrality when you have a study. You would also, for example, with participants, offer them a copy of your research upon its conclusion. So all of these are good basic principles there, and they are enforced by the discipline itself. So in sociology, it's the ASA, the American Sociological Association, or in psychology, the APA, the American Psychological Association. So they do have groups to police what they're doing. All right, let's continue on there. It does mention one other thing, the feminism, and of course you're going to recognize this from Chapter 1 and many other chapters to follow from our big three theoretical paradigms. And so, at its core, at its heart, this is, for example, looking at research there, but and sometimes how this research reflects the examination or influence of women there. Some of the problems that women researchers would face, say in different cultures, in collecting information or data that would not occur for a male researcher there. And this is the first step there, and if things are ever going to change for the better, depending on what area we're talking about, this is how social policy changes their grassroots beginning and how they fulfill their potential. All right, so we do have a minefield, really, of rich resources there to draw from. that, like our PowerPoint says, that was not really a possibility even short time frame ago, and because of technology and advances there and the ability to share things so very rapidly. All right, some more graphs there, but why do we conduct research in all these sciences and disciplines? But it is the applied part right here that we see. So applied sociology does mean we take these results and we make people's lives better, or we try to do that. So if that's the removing of cultural conditions that have been discriminatory, if it's somehow with medicine that improves someone's quality of life and quantity of life, that's the point. Applied means it helps fix problems that people encounter. All right, so some of examples here of this applied sociology on the social policy level there through the U.S. government is the point right here in this slide we see. All right, now statistics are also a very important part of your research. And so here are some basic terms that as you read in journals and articles and continue on in your studies there, not only sociology but many others, this is a quick glance, a very quick shotgun type approach to let you know what was happening in a study. So common terms there, percentage, the mean, median, and mode, those are really three big ones. And if you've ever had a statistics class, which is common for sociology or psychology, you're familiar with those terms. The sociology and psychology are math heavy, believe it or not, and so these are also things that you will run into quite a bit as well. Now, hopefully if our statistics are done correctly there, they will tell us really what we could have read in words, but just in a different display format. And you have to be careful because there's multiple ways to interpret many of these things, and we want to, of course, make sure we're taking away the correct interpretation of all data. You can make numbers say a lot of things, and so be wary. You could have a study that says 72% of people are shown to be aggressive when they have their morning coffee. Well, you can also flip that around and say 28% do not show aggression when they have their morning coffee. So depending on a person's maybe agenda or leanings, keep all of these in mind. All right, so here's some more graphs to illustrate some of these points. They're also in the textbook there. And of course, the writing the research report or something else, this is pulling everything together. So this is a series of steps, and so we are near the end here. And how we do that, if you submit a paper to an article, a journal, or a thesis, there is a specific format to follow. Much more than what we see on here on this PowerPoint. APA style, for example, for psychology, and it seems like every discipline has something unique to the way that they want this information presented. It also, when you get to this point of writing a research report, the space in journals is very precious and limited. So many times something unusual will garner more attention than something that's very common. So let's suppose we do a study and we get 19 similar results, but somebody does it one time and they get an unusual result. Well, if those 20 studies are presented there to a journal, one that's going to stand out is that one, provided everything has been done correctly there, and so it might have a better chance to actually become published. Now again, they got to watch out and make sure that these studies actually do or report what is actually going on and not misrepresenting anything. And that is your job as a reader of this research. So we need this chapter here on research and the basic fundamentals that go along with it to prepare ourselves to be critical consumers of research information. Many headlines that you see in the media, on TV and on the radio, they are misleading, and they don't really give you the correct context for many of these studies. You don't know their sample size, for example, and that's something important. All right, and so there again we have some more considerations for this report that you'll be involved at some point, I'm sure, if you continue taking sociology classes. And it is of benefit to do that and be able to express what one knows in a written form. I hope this has helped you a little bit in finding the important information in the chapter today, and I appreciate your time and watching this, and I will see you next time.